The Copperband butterfly is one of the true OG difficult fish. It has frustrated reefers for decades with their beauty and poor survival rates. I believe I've kept 4 of them over the past 20 years, and apart from the first one, which in truth was a dismal failure, I've had good success with them. I bought that first Copperband when I was about 13, and I was just getting into the hobby. It's safe to say that I most definitely killed that poor fish due to a combination of stupidity, lack of research, and possibly cyanide poisoning from capture. Having long-term success with a Copperband can be broken down in 2 segments: picking the right specimen at your LFS and proper husbandry in your reef tank. Let's start with how to go about things at the fish store. Sadly, Copperbands tend to take a fair amount of damage in the supply chain, so knowing what to look out for is key to getting a good specimen. Firstly, look for obvious signs of disease. Things like flukes are fairly common on butterflies of all sorts. Some Copperbands will have a small fuzzy lump on their fins. This is a fairly common virus infection called, English, don't fail me now, lymphocystis. It's not the end of the world if you see that, as it will go away on its own once the fish is healthy, eating, and in a good condition. More troubling are dark spots or blotches on the body. These can be a sign of internal bleeding, which is almost always fatal. They are fairly delicate fish, and a hard knock during shipping can snap off a rib, which can puncture something very important, like internal organs. Another thing to watch for is the overall condition of the fish. A telltale sign of a fish that's eating poorly or has some sort of a metabolic disruption due to a prolonged period of starvation is pinching above the eyes. If you see a specimen that looks hollow above the eyes, walk away. Lastly, Copperbands are very curious fish and should constantly be investigating its surroundings, looking for any small worms or other invertebrates to snap up. If it's lethargic and just hanging out in a corner, there's high probability that something is wrong with that particular fish. It's not easy finding the right fish, so be prepared to reject a whole bunch before you find the one. So now that you've found a healthy specimen that you want to bring home, what do these guys need to thrive in your reef tank? The following guidelines is what I personally would view as required for responsible keeping and will yield the best chance of success. That isn't to say that there won't be outliners that have managed to keep one under vastly different circumstances. I'm sure that there's some guy out there with a Copperband in a nanotank who is surviving. We won't be focusing on those, as chances for success are low, and it's plain and simply irresponsible to place any fish in an unsuitable environment. They will need a decently sized tank, around 500 liters, 130 gallons, would be suitable for an adult, because remember, these get to be fairly large fish. It's also imperative that the tank is well established and has a rich microfauna for these fish to graze on. Because of this, I wouldn't put one in a tank that's less than 1 year old or so. Having a good number of smaller organisms for it to munch on in the tank will be especially important in the beginning stages, where it might not go for food as actively. One of the main issues people have with these guys is getting them feeding. Luckily, since you've done what I said, that shouldn't be a major hurdle for you. However, sometimes they can need a little bit of encouragement to start feeding again after a move to a new tank. If that's the case, I can highly recommend clams on the half shell, live blackworms, oysters, and if all else fails, bloodworms, the kind you feed to freshwater fish. Once you got it feeding with vigor, you need to feed a lot and often. Preferably feed frozen food several times a day in the initial phases. It's not uncommon to see a Copperband, although feeding, wither away over time. That's often a case of the aquarist simply not feeding enough. They aren't the most boisterous fish and can easily get outcompeted by tangs, angels, and other faster fish. That's why you need to feed a lot to make sure it gets what it needs. Building some sort of a feeder out of a PVC pipe with holes drilled through it can also be a good option, as that will prevent anything but the copperband with its long rostrum to reach the food. A tip that works on all fish with a high metabolism and a constant need for food is to lower the temperature of the tank a bit. What that does is slowing down their metabolism somewhat, lessening the amount of food needed. The last thing to keep in mind is tank mates. This is a fairly delicate fish that can't handle bullying very well at all, and should be introduced before introducing any sort of aggressive fish, say tangs, angels, and stuff like that. Once established into the tank, they can handle themselves fairly well, but if they get hammered just after being introduced to the tank, the chances of them settling in is basically zero. So, to summarize, do your due diligence before picking up a specimen, introduce it to a well-established tank before any other aggressive inhabitants go in there, and feed it with a ton of the right foods, and you should be successful. However, before picking one up, please ransack yourself if you can offer it the right environment to thrive. A lot of copperbands needlessly perish because they don't receive the right care and environment. If it croaks, it's on you. For the right aquarist, this is a stunning species, but it definitely needs some consideration on your part before going out and getting one. I hope this was helpful. If you have any additional questions, just post them down below. If you want more frequent updates from me, please follow me on Instagram, link below. And if you like this kind of content, please like this video and give me a subscribe so I know to keep making it. If you have any other suggestions on fish spotlights that you would like to see, please post that below as well. That's it for me. Have a good one.